Good morning, friends. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. So we're meeting today to do the third part of our Therīgathā special. So this is the Therīgathā that some of you have seen already, that has been printed with some of the translations. And this morning I was thinking about, since yesterday we spoke about Subha, the daughter of a blacksmith, today we could talk, heartwarming news. So we can talk about Subha Jivaka of Mango Grove, which is the poem that you can find when you unfold this whole thing. Right here to the left, there's this whole page, and it's the poem of Subha Jivaka of Mango Grove. But for ease of use, I'll send you actually also an electronic link that you can find the translation that I did. And our resident Tineri knows that I need some coffee here. And yeah, you can find, there's a link here on Sutta Central with the translation. So we will be reading from that translation. And you can find actually the entire Therīgathā translation, the one that I have done, but also the one that Bhante Sujato has done is also on Sutta Central. And then there's also some poems translated by Thanissaro Bhikkhu I've seen. So not the entire Therīgathā, that will give you an opportunity to see the different interpretations that we all have somewhat given to the text. And hello to Maria, to Gita, both Gita Brown and Gita Jnana. Hello to Kumu and Niranjan, Jayanta, welcome friends. And welcome to everyone who hasn't said hello yet, but is watching. And we can start by paying homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddham Tamham Sangham Namasami. So, as mentioned, we're going to read from Therīgathā 14.1, so the verses of the Elder Subha of Jivaka's Mango Grove. And I will be reading from the poem and then sharing some reflections as we go. So the poem begins with actually a sort of kind of commentary from the people that compiled the text together. So there's both the verses of Bhikkhuni Jivaka, and there's also some kind of context information. And so the commentators said, the compilers actually, rather than commentators, the compilers of the text, saying, Bhikkhunis Subha was going to Jivaka's charming mango grove. A rogue obstructed her, so Subha said this to him. Have I done something to offend you that you stand there holding me back? Because it is not proper, friend, for a layperson to touch one who has gone forth. This is serious according to my teacher's instructions. The one faring well has made the trainings clear. I am on the path of complete purity. I am flawless. Why do you stand there holding me back? So we see the context is pretty clear. So Bhikkhunis Subha is entering the forest, and someone that is not particularly wholesome in character comes into her way and And she's like, well, I am a very pure person. She's a fully enlightened being. And just honestly asks him, basically, what is wrong with you? Why are you doing this? What is your problem? But in a polite manner. So have I done something to offend you? Like what is currently going on here? And please do not touch me. So the Buddha has made it quite clear that you should stay quite clear from the monastic sangha, and actually pretty clear to stay away from anyone who's not requesting or is not consenting to any type of touch, really. So I really love when she says, I am flawless, just to make it quite clear since the very beginning that she is a completely pure being, that she has done whatever had to be done in the path. But then to make things even more clear, she states, your mind is turbulent. Mine is not. Your mind is dirty. Mine is not. My mind is flawless and liberated in every way. Why do you stand there holding me back? So not only does she have a clear understanding of her awakening, an experiential understanding of her awakening and liberation, but she also has a clear understanding of the unawakened mind of the rogue who's obstructing her, of the lack of virtue also of the mind that the person she's dealing with has, and also the implications. So there's also a lot of compassion here, knowing that if this sentient being does any type of immoral action with her, who is a fully enlightened woman, it will lead to a really bad destination. There's nothing worse that one can do than, well, do bad actions in general, but in particular bad actions towards an enlightened being, and even more so to the Buddha, of course. But the rogue is a little bit muddle-minded, so he doesn't get it straight away, and he replies, young and innocent girl, what can going forth do for you? Put down that ochre robe. Come enjoy yourself in this flowering forest. So clearly he's a sensualist, so he's not very keen or very interested in monastic life himself. So he thinks that, it's not a good choice for anyone. And so he says, sweet winds blow everywhere from trees full of flower pollen. Early spring is a pleasant season. Come enjoy yourself in this flowering forest. Trees tipped with flowers murmur in the wind, but how can you enjoy yourself if you descend into the forest alone? Surrounded by a multitude of beasts and snakes, wild and agitated elephants, you want to go without a companion into this lonely, dreadful, and immense forest? So the rogue first, highlights all the beautiful aspects of the forest that is entering the spring. So the beautiful flowers, the beautiful smells, and at the same time highlights the kind of fearful aspects of the forest that for pretty much any person, whether they're man or woman, or a transgender person as well, pretty much any sentient being, any human being, and sentient beings too, I would say. The forest can be both a charming place, a beautiful place, but also a dangerous place that is not, in civilization. So there can be, well, rogues as himself, as the rogue is presenting him, with less than wholesome intentions, but also lots of wild beasts and snakes, and a lot of possible dangers that can be quite frightening. So it's interesting to point out a few things here. One is that in the Therīgathā, as well as the Bhikkhunis Samyutta, we see a lot of the Elder Bhikkhunis going to the forest alone to meditate. And it's quite interesting because there are sort of later stories and ideas that actually women, for example, should never go alone by themselves in the forest to practice, or just around the wilderness in general, or even just outside of their homes, or outside of the monastery, outside of their dwelling place, essentially, always having another bhikkhuni with them. So we see that in the texts, actually, definitely in ancient India, that was not the case, but it seems to be more something that has developed as history of Buddhism went by. So clearly here we see the same thing, that Subha, Bhikkhuni Subha, is going by herself to the forest and has this encounter. It's also very interesting to point out how the Buddha, in the gradual training that we were talking about yesterday, also doesn't recommend actually going to the forest to dwell alone straight away to every single practitioner. But actually he is quite cautious. That's why there is a gradual training. I can't remember the name of the bhikkhu. There is I think a sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, right? Yeah. And it's all about forest dwellings, and the bhikkhu goes up to the Buddha and he's like, I really want to go to the forest. And the Buddha is like, no, just stay here with the Sangha. No, like jungle thickets are known to swallow the mind of, of worldlings. So essentially the Buddha had assessed that the mind of the bhikkhu wasn't strong enough to be able to go and practice for long periods of time in the forest. So not just go and take a stroll and like look at the pretty birds and the flowers, but rather actually go and practice for a chunk of time, over a long period of time in the forest, in an empty hut, or at the foot of a tree, or wherever it is. Also later masters, it's interesting to read also when Ajahn Chah, for example, Ajahn Chah's in the book Stillness Flowing, there's a really beautiful account of how he was training the monastics. And so whether they were Thai or they were foreigners, even him, he wouldn't, allow for monastics to just venture in the forest outside of the sort of Sangha. So go on to Dong and whatnot. As soon as they were ordained. And up until to this day, it's my understanding that, in fact, I think in bhikkhu monasteries of the Thai forest tradition, they will wait until the 5th vasa or so, where, unless the monastic seems to be fully well developed at an earlier time, but usually it's around when they're ready to finish their dependence from the teacher. And because, once again, it can be a quite sort of dangerous situation, and one needs to have a steady mind already, somewhat steady mind, in order to be able to do that practice. And also, obviously, be able to face one's fear of uncertainty, one's fear of aggression. The Buddha gives lots of different recommendations of how to transcend fear throughout the suttas. So the first one is actually to recollect the incredible qualities of the Buddha. then recollect the incredible qualities of the Dhamma and recollect the incredible qualities of the Sangha. Also, actually, once again with Ajahn Chah, I'm a big fan of Ajahn Chah, so I will quote him a lot in the moments where he was doing this practice of living by himself in the forest, or perhaps with another bhikkhu. And he would hear sort of spirits and ghosts, and he was just so frightened. What he would be doing over and over again is recollect Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, do different chants, protective chants, and kind of also come to terms that if it was his time to die, because, perhaps in past lives he had made some bad karma towards maybe the animals in the forest that were surrounding his dwelling place. He's like, okay, well, if it's my time, I'm sorry for all the, harm I did to you in past lives, and we'll be even. I'll just accept this. So that was a form, but also recollecting one's own virtue, and right here, right now. Once we take these precepts, whether we're lay people or monastics, taking these precepts full-heartedly, and really, as we were saying yesterday, making the determination not to break them. And so seeing the power of this unbroken sila, which is actually also what is described, so both the Buddha and arahants, so fully enlightened beings, are completely fearless. Like there is no fear appearing in their mind in any shape or form. And so we'll see also in this sutta how this poem, how Subha, being in fact fully enlightened, has no fear whatsoever in any shape or form manifesting, even though it could be a somewhat perhaps dodgy situation and somewhat dangerous. But yeah, there is no fear anywhere. Also because of like complete purity of actions through body, speech, and mind. So unbroken sila. And we see, in fact, also when the Buddha encounters Angulimala, one of the very well-known killers of the time of the Buddha, but also one of the very well-known enlightened beings of the time of the Buddha. Obviously not while he was killing sentient beings, but once he meets the Buddha. And the Buddha establishes him in virtue. And so there's this encounter where Angulimala looks at the Buddha and he's like, oh, great, I'm going to kill this ascetic and, get one of his fingers and put it in my like collection of fingers of all the victims that I have made throughout this life. And he tries to follow the Buddha and intimidate the Buddha, and the Buddha is completely fearless. At a certain point, Angulimala tells him, stop. And he's like, well, Angulimala, I have stopped already. It's you who hasn't stopped. And by that, he means actually you haven't stopped making unwholesome karma. But I have stopped a long time ago. So there's no fear in my mind. Even without actually having to be an arhat. As soon as we enter the stream, for example, our sila has already been so purified that it's not possible to return to a hell realm or to an animal realm, because we're incapable we have stopped to a big chunk of degree. We've done like most of actually the work that needs to be done for awakening, as the Buddha compares it actually to, taking a grain of sand on in our little bit of sand in our hand, and thinking that we have removed the entire sand of the world except for that. That's what stream entry is. Right? It's like, is there more sand in my hand, or is there more sand in the in the whole world? And so that's the work that needs to be done when one is a stream enter. So you erase any type of really bad state of existence from ever coming into being again. So yeah, once again, he stops Angulimala, or he creates the conditions for Angulimala to understand the message and stop making unwholesome decisions. And not only that, actually, Angulimala goes forth, practices, and is very capable of understanding the teachings of the Buddha and attains full awakening. So it's so beautiful that we all have this opportunity to just stop, right? We can really do it. It's incredible. And then there is no suffering, because that's essentially what also the reason why this fear stops being present in an enlightened mind is because we're not afraid of change anymore. We're not afraid of alteration anymore, because we understand things as they fully are. We understand dependent origination. We're not attached to one particular state of being altogether, but rather we act only out of compassion. So that's also what Subha is trying to do. Just stop. Don't make this really bad karma. But she has no problem with there is no fear in her mind of like what potentially could happen to her if the rogue is unvirtuous. This is also why it's important, once again, in the gradual training that we were talking about yesterday, that why the first step, whenever the Buddha talks to anyone who has it at the very beginning, or gives any sort of teaching, he establishes them in virtue and establishes them in hiriyottapa, so encourages them to cultivate hiriyottapa, a healthy fear and shame of doing anything that might be unwholesome, that might hurt oneself and others. So it's very, very important to understand and remember that in Buddhism, the practice of sila is not some kind of like half-assed like thing, but actually is extremely important. It is what creates the soil for really good practice, where we can then plant seeds, and they will be sure that they will turn into plants. But if we don't have that fertile soil, you can plant the best heirloom tomato seeds in the Sahara Desert, and nothing will grow because the conditions aren't there. So then the rogue continues. So he's like a shiny golden doll, like a nymph amongst beautiful vines, you will stand out, wearing the finest linen from Kasi. I will be under your control if we live together in the forest, because there is no one more dear to me than you, creature with the soft eyes of a dryad. If you were to say to me, come, let's live a pleasant household life, you would live in a sheltered palace and have women attending you. You would wear the finest linen from Kasi, as well as garlands and makeup. I will adorn you with lots of gold, jewels, and pearls. You would rest on a fabulous bed with a beautiful blanket, freshly washed and dyed, on a brand new mattress upholstered with wool and scented with sandalwood. But if you live the chaste and holy life, then like a blue lotus that rises above the water but is not touched by anyone, you will wither away all alone. So here we see that the rogue is trying another technique, since the fear and trepidation of animals and him being there, and he's like, well, do you want some company? I'll keep you company. And she's like, yeah, not interested. So then he's like, okay, let me try with essential pleasures. And he's like, how about a comfortable life. If you even really want to be in the forest, we can actually live together and have a nice little hut, so you can have best of both worlds. Both the adventure of the forest, but you'll have someone who is there protecting you, but then you can also have all the comforts of the household life. And instead of this rags here that you're wearing, this ogre robe, this celibacy thing, kind of boring. How about instead I get you all these beautiful cloth, expensive cloth, and this beautiful scents and makeup, and all of these sensual pleasures, and then we can do the whole thing, the householder life of reproducing and having a great time in the forest. And then he makes the metaphor, which actually I find actually a really beautiful metaphor. Of the blue lotus that rises above the water, but it's not touched by anyone, because that you can't pick lotus flowers, right? You can only see them there. Nobody can really enjoy them in the way that usually we tend to think of flowers. We grow the flowers and then we cut them and we put it in a vase and enjoy it for as long as it lasts. But lotus flower is just there. Nobody can really touch it. As soon as you cut it, it dies. So he says, you're going to be there, essentially you're this beautiful flower, but nobody will be able to take to enjoy. You can just leave it there in the pond. So he's also kind of, I guess, trying to instill the fear of old age in Subha, going, well, now you're young and you're having fun being a bhikkhuni, being a renunciant, but then you're going to be old and decrepit and nobody's going to want you. I won't want you, and nobody else will want you either. So lost opportunity, and you're just going to be withering away like a lotus that will just kind of die on itself. It's also a very beautiful scene. When I was translating this, the very beginning, I wasn't really understanding what the text was saying, because in Italy, there's not that many lotus flowers. So I started studying the science on how lotus flowers come into being and how they die, and they die like literally on itself, and then the seeds are there, and then another lotus flower comes into being, which is also a beautiful image of rebirth. Why it's also very present in a lot of Indian literature, both Buddhist and other types. Anyway, so Bhikkhuni Subha is unfazed by all the attempts of the rogue, and so she replies to him, "What do you consider of value here, in this carcass, full of corpses, bound for the cemetery, destined to break apart? What have you seen that makes you so deranged?" I quite love it for many different reasons. One is that she calls the rogue deranged. And then also how she mentions that when she's talking about the body, she's also mentioning the other corpses that are within the body itself. So we see it all alive and well, but actually if you open it up, well, if we've eaten meat, there's a lot of corpses that are in our stomach. But even if we don't eat meat, there's lots of sentient beings growing in, living actually in the human body, that are born and die and live all the time. It's just that we don't think of it in that way. We're not observing too much. People sometimes also have worms, so they're quite visible when one goes and defecates, and then you see all the little worms, little friends that have been there. Early resident is a little disgusted. Have very, very expressive features to your itinerary. It's quite amusing. Yeah, so it's not only what we have inside, but also ourselves. We're the same nature. So bound for the cemetery, destined to break apart. So she's like, yeah, you're saying that this thing is so pretty, but actually it's a big carcass already. And we already know where it's going. And he replies, he's still not getting it. So he goes, all right, let me start flattering her. Let me try with the flattering moves. She starts going, your eyes are like a symphony, like a dryad in the mountains. Seeing your eyes fills me with sensual desire. Your eyes are like lotus flowers in a face that shines like pure gold. Seeing your eyes, my excitement grows evermore. It's also very self-centered because he's only talking about himself and his emotions and like seeing how beautiful she is. And then he imagines, the relationship together. So he goes, even when we're far apart, I will remember your long lashes and pure eyes. Because there is no one more dear than you with the soft eyes of a dryad. And she's like, basically, all the enlightened Bhikkhunis talk to my hand. So she replies, you want to walk where there is no path. You want to take the moon as a toy. You want to jump over Mount Mera. You chase after a disciple of the Buddha. There is nothing in this world, even with all its devas, which I could now have craving for. I do not know what it could be like, since it has been completely uprooted by the path. So essentially, he's saying you're trying to do the impossible. Those are all the metaphors. Walking where there is no path, where there's no road. Like taking the moon as a toy, trying to jump over a mountain, because she's a disciple of the Buddha. She's fully awakened. And so there is nothing that could tempt her, make her change her mind. She sees things as they really are. And so here it's a very powerful statement where it says, I don't even know what craving could be like because it has been uprooted. So there's nothing that experientially, like the work has been done. So it's irreversible. Like there's nothing in the world. Oh, can you imagine just how freeing that is? No type of, any state of existence that can appeal to her, whether it's divine or human. No refined type of existence. Completely uprooted. And she uses quite strong images here. So cast away like burning coal, destroyed like a worthless bowl of poison. So this is what sensual pleasure is, what we were talking about yesterday, what they really are. It's just that we don't see them clearly. We are still infatuated, with shapes, forms, tastes, smells, sights, touches. That's kind of like all we know. Or mental fabrications, ideas. We don't see the danger in them. We only see the gratification in them. We only see the danger when things, don't go the way that we like. But for the most part, we see them still as the only kind of reliable source of happiness that is easily available. But a fully enlightened being has pierced through all of this delusion. And so they're no longer subject to this confusion. So they see it as it really is, burning coal, a worthless bowl of poison. So the Buddha, uses always very strong similes. And he talks about, in fact, when a being is enlightened, it's kind of like if they were trying to bring a man on this charcoal pit with, lightened charcoal fired up, and they're not interested in like getting into it and getting burnt because they see the fire, they see the danger. So in the same way, we should be practicing in that way and seeing danger in sensual pleasures. But she's done the work already, so she sees the danger already. And it has been completely uprooted by the path. And so she continues by saying, one who has not contemplated or has not been close to the teacher may be enticed by you, but I am one who knows, so you're wasting your time here. So essentially, anyone who's not a disciple of the Buddha is someone who has not essentially practiced the Dhamma, who has not done these contemplations for fully realizing the nature of the body, for fully realizing the nature of sensuality. Can be, that can work for them. What the rogue is sort of offering, but she's someone who knows. So he's like, yeah, there's nothing to be done. You're wasting your time. She also continues by saying, whether I'm reviled or respected, whether there is pleasure or pain, my mindfulness is stable. Knowing that conditioned things are not beautiful, my mind is never stained. It's a very beautiful verses. So essentially, she has transcended the worldly winds, the things that we're constantly affected by. Oh, that person likes me, that person doesn't like me. I like being liked, but I don't like not being liked. And I want to be famous, and I want people to honor me, and I want to constantly acquire so many different things, right? And it's just so human. Literally every single unenlightened being thinks in the same way, to one degree or the other. There are obviously people who are the extreme spectrum, that they will pursue praise, honor, and gain in a sort of shameless, without any even trace of hiriyottapa, which is a very horrible state of being, both in this life and in future lives. And then all the way up to people practicing the teachings of the Buddha but haven't quite realized the danger of sensual pleasures, where we're like, but I still really want to be liked by everyone. I really don't want not to be liked. It would be really sad if Ayya Brahmavara didn't like me anymore, and Tinri didn't like me anymore, and Anagarika Jens didn't like me anymore. I'm like, right? It's kind of hurtful and sad. So there's still that tendency, and it's okay. Like, we have to understand that it's a path. It's a gradual process, but that the objective is also not caring in the way that we feel superior. We're like, oh well, we just don't care about all of this. No, we just understand the nature. We get to the root of it, and we understand that there are certain things that we can't control. And that all these, whether people like us or not, and we can actually even reflect in our life how many times perhaps we were best friends with someone, or we were in a relationship with someone, right? And we are like, oh, this person is so great, and I have so much trust and faith in them. And then something alters. There's alteration, and the trust is broken and the faith is broken, and all of a sudden our relationship with that person shifts. And so we see that whenever we put our bets, our stakes on things that are conditioned, they're unreliable by their nature. So that's that's the problem of the unenlightened mind, that constantly seeks happiness and reliability where there is only unhappiness and unreliability to be found, because everything is conditioned, And that's why she's saying conditioned things are not beautiful, essentially. So asubha, as we were saying yesterday, the vipallasa, the distortion of perception that we have. We see the beautiful in the non-beautiful and what is actually non-beautiful, including this body, right? So beautiful, but as we were saying, well, would we want a nice bag made out of our skin, or even the skin of someone we are attracted to? Oh, how lovely. Or, yeah, as we'll see later, like perhaps the eyes of the person that we are really attracted to. we like a little pendant with their eyes. How quite lovely, huh? Or the beautiful hair. Would we like to have a little jacket made of either our hair or the hair of people that we're attracted by? Kind of gross, isn't it? So then, yeah, her mind is never stained by any of these things. It's a very nice place where to be. So she says, and she continues, I'm a female disciple of the one faring well. I travel with the Eightfold Path as my vehicle. Free from influences, with darts removed, I enjoy going to an empty dwelling. So essentially, she is stating, once again, her awakening. And then she shares the precious teaching with the rogue. So she says, I have seen well-painted wooden puppets of children, bound with sticks and strings, like a group of little dancers. When those sticks and strings are removed, when everything is untied, non-functional, splayed out, one could not find anything in its parts. So where could the mind settle? Likewise, my body parts do not function without those mind states. This being the case, where could the mind settle? So this is a profound teaching on non-self, actually. So she is essentially equating, like the little marionettes, the puppets that are bound with different strings, etc. And so that we perceive them as little children or as dolls because the parts are in that moment composed together. But once you cut the strings and the puppet falls apart, then you only perceive it as stick here, stick there, stick that, right? It's the same when this body, for example, will die, right? Right now you're seeing it together, so you're like, that's Ayya Soma. But as this body dies, will die, and then after a while, people will find and they will go like a hip bone, a collarbone, right? Like a tooth, a skull, and it becomes something different. It's not Ayya Soma anymore. So everything is dependently arisen. And also our process of identification is subject to alteration. And so she also says here, very important in terms of her mind states as well. So how certain mind states of lust, of craving, of wanting, of sexual desire are also dependently arisen. So not only the physical part, but also the mental component that is part of the human experience. So she says in the same way, now it's only mental parts. Like since I have uprooted, I created essentially, I have pierced through reality. There is no opportunity for those types of mental states to arise in the mind of an enlightened being. They will never even think twice whether the person is attractive or not attractive, or it's just they're incapable of having any type of sexual impulse. And not because sex is impure, not because sex is like terrible, but just because sex is a form of greed. It's actually the primordial form of craving that we have as sentient beings. Any single sentient being. When you see animals, for example, it's so clear. We tend to kind of refine it a little bit in the human world. We're a little bit more, we add more prerequisites. Oh, they have to have a job of this sort, or like a height of this sort, or like, I want to travel with them in this particular place or in this other place. And, they have to be from this social status or this particular country, like so many different differentiations. Yeah, let's say in the animal world, they're a little bit more basic. And yeah, it's actually pretty unappealing, pretty raw, pretty rough. And when you are actually in the forest or in natural settings, or even you take care of animals who are not neutered, then you see the real deal. It's really not beautiful. And there's nothing, moralistic about it. It's just that you just see, oh yeah, they're going out of their impulses, and the impulse essentially is to reproduce and keep the cycle going, the natural cycle going. Anyway, so then she keeps saying, gives more similes, hoping to get through to the rogue so that he doesn't commit any bad actions, and hopefully stops making bad actions altogether and sees the Dhamma. So she keeps saying, it's like seeing a painting on a wall made with orpiment. If your vision of it is distorted, you misperceive it as a human being. So essentially having a mirage, seeing something and thinking that it's something else. Says it's like a supreme illusion, like a golden tree in a dream. Blind one, you're getting close to something as meaningless as a marionette amidst a group of people. Spinning in a blood-red hole, engulfed in pus and tears, here watery tumors are born, various eye components balled up together. And then the compilers of the text proceed by saying, she pulled out that charming eye, and with a mind of non-attachment, she said, well then, take your eye. And she gave it to that man. So like she literally takes her eye, like eradicates it, and gives it to the rogue. And in that moment, his lust dissipated and he apologized. So he says, may you be well, living the holy life. This will not happen again. Assailing such a person is like embracing a blazing fire or picking up a poisonous snake. May you be well, forgive me. So the Bhikkhuni was let go, and from there she went to the excellent Buddha. Seeing the characteristic of excellent merit, her eye was restored. So she first tried to give him a Dhamma talk, but that didn't work. So then she was like, how about I give him a Dhamma talk action? And so once again, we see the fearlessness of Bhikkhuni Subha that literally goes to the point of not only not being afraid of being physically harmed, but only being concerned for others. So out of compassion, she didn't want for the rogue to commit a bad action, not out of fear for her own incolumity. Would you say that in English? Incolumita. Okay, that is one of the translations that doesn't work from Italian to English. Yeah, not afraid of her own, sort of safety. But rather, once again, only out of concern for the other person. And so we see that she actually she's totally fine also at mutilating her own body because she sees the nature of it. And to give a practical lesson to the rogue who understands it straight away, because her beautiful eyes are not that beautiful once they are not part of the the whole setup. And and he also understands the entity of the bad action that he was about to commit. So he apologized and is grounded in Dhamma. All right, so we can, with 3 sadhus, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, so let's see if there are any comments, and you're welcome to type them in. Hello to all the friends who have joined us in the meanwhile. And Faizi asks, I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. What is the Buddhism concept about soul or spirit? Well, the Buddhist concept of the soul is that it's a non-soul. And by that, we mean that what we usually refer to as soul, what we usually refer to as sentient being, is constantly changing. And hence, it's not permanent. Hence, there is only kind of a superficial appearance that is the same sentient being. But in reality, it's constantly changing. And so there is not anything that is permanent that we can label as this is who I truly am. This is who I will always be, or who I always was. And so we can see that, if we reflect on our lives, even within this lifetime, like when I was a little child, well, I used to like playing with a lot of weird toys, like my friends' toys, anyway, a lot of things that I'm not very interested in doing these days. So my interests have changed dramatically. I used to be also quite evil at a certain point of my of my childhood. I like to somewhat kind of not torture, but I was a little bit sadistic with the other kids. Like if they wanted to play with me and my circle of friends, I would make sure that they would do a lot of humiliating things in order to join the group. So I was a little sadistic. That's definitely not the case anymore, luckily. Then, I liked all this children music that was popular in Italy. Not a big fan anymore. Then I had an entirely different body. Actually, also science tells us that 99.9% of the body that we had as children is not there anymore. It might be even more than 99.9%. Anyway, it's constantly changing. And there are times in our lives when the entire thing, 100%, is not there. Right? So we see already we have been born and and died and born and died. In fact, the process of birth and death is happening as we speak in every single moment. There's something that is dying and that is reborn in a different way. So we have the concept of the understanding of dependent origination. So there are causes and conditions that produce certain results. And we tend to identify with those results. And we tend to think of them as being permanent and who we are until they change again. And that's what creates essentially a lot of suffering and unstableness in our life, right? We think that this body belongs to us, that it's who we are. But, well, if this body belonged to me, it wouldn't be sick right now. This body would definitely not be sick because I would tell this body to be healthy. It would also not age, right? I was definitely not looking forward to all these wrinkles here, right? That they showed up when I turned 30. So if it belonged to me, I would have said, yeah, body do not produce wrinkles. Or even emotions. We tend to think, okay, maybe the body is not me, but the emotions are me. But when we're sad or depressed, can we control and tell our emotions, don't be depressed, don't be sad? No. I mean, there are some people who can pretend, they're pretty good at repressing perhaps their emotions, and which has other types of consequences. But yeah, it's just a scene, it's acting. But we don't really have any ownership towards these things because they don't belong to us. And what the Buddha says, whatever doesn't belong to you, abandon it. Because it's only suffering. So we can't control the consequences, which is basically what we try to do all the time, constantly trying to control consequences that are not ours. But we can't control the causes. So once we start learning this process of dependent origination in a practical way, so not by reading it in a book and studying it to impress our friends during happy hour when we're breaking the precepts, but rather actually fully understanding it in every moment. How is every single mind state that I have, or any experience that I have, how is it dependently arisen? What are the causes and conditions that create either a state of suffering or a state of unconditional happiness in my mind? Then once we start understanding this process, we can become skilled at putting the right causes and conditions in place, because that's what we can control. And that is what is karma, volitional actions. It's just that we do a lot of volitional actions that we don't really know the consequences of them. So sometimes we get pleasant results and sometimes we get unpleasant results. And then there's this mixed bag of like distress and like happiness and confusion all along. But with the Dhamma, the Buddha, is incredible. So he gives us the entire path, the entire way to only cultivate the wholesome, only cultivate a mind that then has as a result unconditional happiness rather than unconditional suffering that we're very skilled to do. And you're all very kind. Yes, and Kumo says, the Therīgathā resonates so well with humans even after 2,600 years. Amazing. Yes, that is the quality of the Dhamma that fills my mind with joy. The timelessness of the Dhamma. How incredible is that, right? And also, how humbling is it that the minds of human beings is exactly the same, in struggling with the same things. We're just so common. When I got into Buddhism, I thought I was so special. I was like, nobody can really understand me because it's so hard to find an Italian who has lived in all those places and had all those like experiences and workplaces and like, I'm not really Italian, I'm not really American, I'm not really this, and I've cultivated so complicated. I will never be able to find anyone who is just like me. Then I started practicing Buddhism and I started realizing actually I'm just a big jumble of greed, hatred, and delusion. And everyone else who's practicing with me is a big jumble of greed, hatred, and delusion. It's just that we look slightly different, and perhaps there are, certain labels that we apply. I'm Italian, one's British, one is American, one is American too, one is American Sri Lankan, the other is American Danish or something. So we tend to even refine more and more, like our discrimination of labels. But yeah, literally all the same thing. And no different. And like we think, today is such a modern world, modern society. I love also that delusion of thinking that everything is so much better now than it was in ancient India. But is it really? All of these things are very good questions to ask ourselves. And Sud says, so if I understand this correctly, the person with right view would not worry about what others think, since most people in the world are deluded and unable to see that the body is not substantial. Yes, the body and mind, they're both not substantial. So it's very important. It's not only the physical, but pretty much both the physical and the non-physical. And yeah, my understanding is that the enlightened person is not bothered because they don't have a sense of self. So why do we care so much if people like us or don't like us, right? Because it all comes to this sense of that there is this me, there is this being that wants to be happy. And we equate our happiness with being liked. And being liked means having pleasant feeling. So this is why the practice of Vedana is so highlighted by the Buddha, to fully understand Vedana. I mean, he highlights a lot of different practices, but I think this is a really powerful one, to truly understand Vedana, to truly understand pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, and neutral feeling. And in meditation practice, that is the ideal setup where to actually fully contemplate Vedana. Because when we're about in the world, there's lots going on, and we usually only pay attention to extremely strong feelings. And usually we crave a lot more of the pleasant feeling. We're like, yeah, give me more of that. And the unpleasant feeling, we're like trying to escape from it as much as possible. And the neutral feeling, we're completely oblivious of it. And the Buddha instead encourages us to see pleasant feeling, to contemplate it, see fully what does it mean physically to have a pleasant sensation, and to see it actually as unpleasant. So to counterbalance it. And then the unpleasant feeling, interestingly enough, he doesn't recommend for us to see it as pleasant, but rather he encourages us to see it as a dart. So without essentially just going, okay, maybe there's pain, for example, physical pain in meditation. We just acknowledge it as physical pain. So just a little twitch, like a dart, like something uncomfortable. But we don't go, oh, I don't like this. I don't want this. May it stop. Like, oh, poor me. Like my leg that is getting, mutilated, and won't be able ever to walk again. And we can be very tragic, and we can see how tragic we are in meditation just while sitting, doing something so safe, right? And that really doesn't have that many consequences. But we react. We start understanding how reactive we are towards what we don't like in terms of physical sensation. So we want to train ourselves to remove the I don't like this, I don't want this, all the mental drama, and just see pain as pain without any suffering. And then at the same time also to cultivate a mind of loving kindness. So to cultivate the Brahma Viharas. So instead of cultivating aversion, which is what we do, like, I don't like this, I don't want this, we also don't want to cultivate to do the nutriment of, pleasantness. So like focus too much on the good sensations, but rather dwell with a mind of loving kindness, dwell with a mind of compassion, dwell with a mind of mudita, rejoicing in others' goodness, and then also obviously equanimity, the foremost, to develop as well, which is a little bit more advanced practice. But all of that then creates a very good counteraction to see fully, to replace, the aversion that can come from unpleasant feelings. And then observe neutral feelings, which is pretty much the majority of our experience. And we fully see it in meditation practice, because that's like even more emphasized in meditation practice. And so train ourselves to be aware of neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling, and to see it as impermanent, so as constantly changing. So that's why we also get bored, sometimes at the very beginning in meditation, because we are not trained to see neither pleasant or unpleasant. So we'd rather start planning how to sweep the floor. It's just like really something that we would never normally do, if we're not in meditation practice, or we would do anything rather than sit still. It's really interesting. And that is because, we're just not seeing things as they are. So that's also how we see how we're fabricating delusion all the time. How we're not really living. Also Western scientists do a lot of that research as well. But basically, I can't remember, the statistics are crazy. Like, we ignore 80 or 90% of like our experience in every moment. It's incredible. It's wonderful. But so far, Buddhism is the only discipline that I know that actually tells you how to instead become aware of 100%. And to fully understand also what you are aware of, by the way. So sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Such incredible. I love the Dhamma. And Sud says, also, does she really say female disciple? Can Savika could just be disciple? Could it be an equally appropriate translation to say Savaka could be male disciple? Please correct me if I'm wrong. Well, she's talking about herself. So yeah, Savaka is both the female and male, but in particular, she's talking about, let me see where it was. Well, it's a female. So you see the, I don't know how you say it in English. The
female entity.
Yeah, like there's like a barram.
A diacritical.
Diacritic, yes, thank you, Ayya. Yes, there's a diacritic at the end of Savika, so that's the female form of Savika. So I highlighted female disciple because sometimes a lot of women are erased from religious texts, so it's very important that we also know and have evidence that there are lots of female practitioners. But yeah, that is, of course, it's just a clarification, but it's literally no different for a male disciple as well, or a transgender disciple. Kumo says, other than most nerve cells and some cells in the retina, we don't have any other cells we brought with us when we were born. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
And eggs in the ovary.
Yes, and Amaranta says, being accepted is too important to our societies, but what I understand is metta and karuna are the key. Yeah, well, it's, we're essentially being liked or what other people are thinking about us. That is a form of acquisition. So we're trying to always acquiring things. Also, greed, hatred, and delusion is acquisitions. So it's things that we attach to. It's not just a byproduct. We really are attaching to it. We really are constantly seeking to have something. That's the nature of the unenlightened mind. As long, we'd rather be in a hell realm and have some form of existence. The Bhavatantra, like we just want to experience something. It doesn't matter. Acquiring things, rather than letting go of things. And letting go is actually a form of giving. So developing the Brahma Viharas is a form of giving. We're letting go of acquisitions, and we are developing an incredible, wholesome mind of all these beautiful qualities that then are an incredible gift to the world. So it's one of the most generous things to do. How beautiful it is. We have here right now at Empty Cloud Monastery some practitioners that have a lot of metta well developed. Well, they give us all so many gifts of metta every day. I'm very happy. And Sud says, Kumu, nerve cells change synaptic plasticity is a well-known phenomenon, and cell membranes change the ribosomes and organelles, definitely probably they'll pronounce it that way, are constantly created and destroyed. DNA is also constantly corrected in order to maintain genetic fidelity. It's constantly repaired. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I love how smart you are. Yes, so we see that actually it's quite remarkable how Buddhism is not in contradiction with science. Actually, I feel like it fills in the dots that Western science or just human science really has perhaps doesn't know exactly. There are some kind of like consciousness. A lot of Western scientists anyway, try to look for a physical component of consciousness and have all sorts of like different ideas on how it could be, but they can't come to anything substantial. And so from the Buddhist perspective, they're only finding consequences of consciousness rather than the real deal. So yeah, very interesting. And anyone has any comments here at Acti Cloud Monastery? No?
I think I'm really struck that there's also a Christian saint who did the same thing with the eyeball.
Oh, I didn't know. Who is that?
I don't know. I'll have to research it. But I remember she put her eyeballs on a tray and presented them to somebody who was interested in her.
Wow, very
Isn't that
fascinating.
amazing?
It
Yeah.
might be though also an influence actually from the East. So Ayya Brahmavara here is sharing how there is apparently a Christian saint that she also did the same thing. And because I know that in the Middle Ages, for example, there was one of the Jataka tales. So the story of the Buddha and his enlightenment actually came to Europe, and the Buddha was transformed into a Christian saint, and the story was basically all Christianized, and it was a greatest hit in medieval Europe. So it could be a similar impact, because once again, the Dhamma is so universal, and these stories are so powerful that they have an incredible, profound message. And obviously also the fact that Christian monasticism has its roots in Eastern monasticism. So that's kind of like also highlighted in Catholic monasteries. This is not Ayya Soma's thinking or saying, but if you go to Eremo di Camaldoli in Italy, which is one of the like oldest monasteries and pretty, somewhat conservative, you can say, monastery in Italy as well. It was very beautiful when I went there a few years ago. It had the history of monasticism, and I was so surprised to see that the history of monasticism, according to the Christian monks, wasn't starting with the Christian saints, the Christian, the Desert Fathers, but rather it was starting with the Buddha. Yeah, it's quite remarkable, and how they were explaining how this type of life has the Buddha was actually the forefather of monasticism in the way that he built a tradition based and focused around monasticism. And then of course they mentioned all the Jains as well, and the different Hindu forms of asceticism and monasticism, and as once again all of this as the history of also Christian monasticism. And Gita is saying how Ajahn Brahm also speaks about Buddhism influencing Christianity. I should check that out. I didn't know. Sud said Saint Lucy gave her eyes to her suitor. So it's Santa Lucia. I'm a really bad Italian, because actually Italians normally really know well all of these saints and all these stories, but I had a really secular upbringing, and I am pretty bad. I'm actually learning about Christianity or Catholicism more as my Buddhist practice is moving forward. So yeah, it's a story from 302 Anno Domini. That makes sense, because I also learned somewhat recently that there were Buddhists in Italy around that time, right before essentially Constantine, the Emperor Constantine, decided to convert en masse everybody in the empire, and if they didn't convert, they would be killed. So very few options. Great. Oh, Amaranta says, yes, it's Santa Lucia, but the meaning is very different. I'm going to look it up. This is quite remarkable thing to know. All right, so I think that's all for this morning. And this evening we will be meeting for monk chat with Ayya Brahmavara as well. Thank you, Ayya, for joining us. And then maybe, who knows, there might be also Bhakti Sudaso, but we're trying to give him as much time to, for himself, since he always teaches a lot. But anyway, there will definitely be 2 Bhikkhunis to this evening to answer any questions that you might have. And then we'll get back on retreat. And there are still going to be some live streams here and there, but all our live stream hours will be covered by recordings. I mean, all the live streams that are not happening live, there will be recordings from previous things that happened in the past, in the history of Buddhist insights and Empty Cloud Monastery, of the different monastics who have come through. And then we will resume again with a full schedule in April, with more monastics that are visiting Empty Cloud. So we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.